Hello, and welcome to the Amy Edwards Show. I'm your host, Amy Edwards. We're here to transform our lives and become our best version, and then the next best version, and then the next best version, whatever that looks like. And I could not be more excited that you're here today because we have a fabulous guest. I know I always say that, but they're just so fabulous. And today is like, I'm stoked. And before we get started, I just want to remind you that this is so incredible that you're even here for yourself. Every time you listen to something like this, you're doing it for yourself to transform and to show up for yourself. And that is just such a beautiful thing. So thank you to you, and, thank yourself, because we're all in this together and trying to get better and learn from each other and raise our voices. So I'm so stoked today to raise the voice, or at least do my part in raising the voice, of Neeta Bhushan. I did not want to mess your name up. I want to get it perfect. Neeta, I am so excited to talk to you today because you are an emotional health advocate. You are a best-selling author to 3 books, and your 4th is coming out January 31st, which, this will be out right before that. So everyone has time to pre-order at thatsuckednowwhat.com. You are a fabulous speaker and an advocate for people to, I think, that one of my favorite phrases that you have is find the magic in the mess. That's so beautiful. And so I feel it in my heart right now. Thank you so much for coming today. And I'm so excited we get to do this in person.
I know. Yeah. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. How long have you been in Austin?
It's actually, I'm celebrating my 2-year anniversary of Austin.
Oh, wow.
Of Austin winter, as we're,
So you moved here during the pandemic? Or?
Yeah, we did. Kind of the tail end when it was 2021.
Yeah.
And
you were pregnant maybe? Because you have two young children.
Oh, yes. I was fully pregnant. And
talk about magic in the mess. I mean, really.
And I had a 2-year-old.
And you had a 2-year-old.
So, that's for those that spend time with toddlers. He was my Ari, my son, was definitely in it. And then we moved away from the only caretaker that he had ever known.
Wow.
Because we don't have family that live around us. And so our nanny became family. Her and her kids became our family pretty much. And we left her. And so I didn't realize that he could have such a loss, at 2. And
wow.
And so that was a big transition because he did not like any of the other caretakers or babysitters or anybody. It was a whole acclimation to a new school. And at 2, where we were in LA, they didn't really have masks. And so he kind of got scared because everyone was wearing them here. And you can't reason with a 2-year-old.
No, you cannot. No, you cannot. You could try.
You could try.
It's a futile exercise.
Yeah. So we had to eventually pull him out. So there was a lot of restructuring. We just started another project, which was another business at the time. And I was fully pregnant. And by the way, we were also remodeling a home that we had just moved into. I know. Just add more magic to the fire.
Had you started working on this yet?
No, but it was actually in the back of my mind.
Well, yeah.
Because my 2-year-old had tantrums and meltdowns every day to remind me that he's human.
Yeah.
And to also remind me, take a chill pill, Mom. And I was like, oh my gosh, why are there so many contractors in my house? And the funny thing is my husband is originally from India. And so he was not used to this, how do Americans actually remodel their homes? Because over there, everyone works really fast and you don't move in until it's all ready and done. And here, when the guys are telling you, it'll be done next week. And then, it'll be done 2 more weeks. And, you just couldn't work. So there were days where we would be staying at the La Quinta across the street from our house because you can't breathe. And it brought up a lot of, just triggers, activations, mess in our marriage, in our relationship, in our connection. It was probably a tough time. We were in the fire for sure.
And so did you just start to develop new tactics of dealing with life? There's nothing like becoming a parent really that's going to teach you new things. And because you've written books before and, but then you just open up this new part of yourself where you're like, holy crap, I have to deal with this person. And This small person I created.
This tiny little person. Well, so this was, honestly, it was like the full beginning of this new walk, because I'm like, all right, I've been through some hard stuff. I grew up with a lot of like darkness and
you had an
toughness.
abusive relationship too, right?
Oh yeah. So, and we can get into that, but that was like my full awakening. And I had gone through a lot of losses. I lost my parents when I was young. And so that was a really big thing, but nothing really prepared you for the moment of just utter chaos, which is probably why the subtitle came before the actual title, How to Embrace the Joy and Chaos and Find Magic in the Mess.
Yeah.
And finding magic in the mess was literally a mantra for me when I was going through my dark days of a divorce, of leaving this very toxic relationship. But then you add 2-year-olds and chaos and moving and just regular life happenings, not like big T traumas, which I'm definitely seasoned at, but just life happenings into the mix. And you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, that sucked.
Now what? Yes.
So to actually add a little sense of humor through the sometimes chaotic messiness that happens in our life, where you can't just sulk in a corner and cry, but you just have to like laugh at it because it is kind of hysterical and ridiculous at the same time. And so, but yeah, my journey hasn't always been embracing the joy, and it hasn't always been, like embracing the fun out of it, right? Because going through and losing my parents early on was definitely a
How old were you?
season. So my mom battled cancer for about 6 years.
Wow.
Starting when I was 10.
Oh my gosh.
And so she was in and out of remission, and she died when I was 16.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it was a really tough.
I'm so sorry.
So
That's
tough.
Yeah. I've lost both my parents. And so
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm just sorry.
Yeah.
I was older though. And just like having kids that age too, I'm like, it's hard no matter what age you are. So 16 is like, oof.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously you don't know because you're like the only person in your friends group that's losing a parent.
Right.
And then going through this season of darkness where you're also a teenager and you like boys and you want to go to concerts and you want to go to the mall because going to the mall was, a thing back then.
Yeah.
And so, but I had to go to the hospital and I had to stay in an ICU room and I had to do my homework and perform for the nurses because they thought it was fun and perform for my mom because she couldn't come to the piano recital or the ballet or whatever. And so I was the oldest of 2 younger brothers. And that really started my trajectory of like caretaking. And not only that, but also, okay, this idea that like life is tough and it's not supposed to be easy and it's not supposed to be fun, or maybe it's fun, but there's a lot of sadness going on. And I felt like there's this big dark cloud of sadness. So this period of time where I would enter so much trauma began at 16 when I lost my mom. And then a year later, I lost my brother to an asthma attack. And so it was almost immediately to the day, a year later, my mom dying. And that really took us it shook our core.
How could it not?
I mean,
how could it not?
It set my dad into like extreme depression, losing 2 people that he loved within a year. So it was major trauma. And for us, I think it was just, we were in that period of survival. It wasn't, there was nothing else. It was like one foot in front of the other, and it was as if you're in this really dark tunnel. And then 2 years after that, my dad got, funny story, well, funny, not funny, but we were just starting to get out of our, like grief bubble and starting to come out and see family members and, being brought up in a Filipino Indian environment, there's a lot of family weddings and a lot of like weddings is a big thing. And so we were preparing to go to our first family wedding after all of this darkness. And so my dad had silver gray hair. And so we're like, Pa, let's go dye your hair. Because maybe there's some women there that are single, And so we dyed his hair. It was a box dye. And all of a sudden he like swells up like a puffer fish. And literally I get this like feeling in my chest and in my stomach of like, you know, that feeling that, oh my God, something bad is going to happen. And because it was just PTSD, and lo and behold, we had to rush him to the hospital, and they did all of these like weird tests, you know, because they're like, well, it's not really, he's allergic, but let's just do these routine tests. Well, it turns out that they found that he was stage 4 lung cancer. And there was an inoperable tumor, and I nearly lost my shit that day. I was screaming and yelling at the doctors, you know, thinking at like my 18-year-old self, you know, had so much voice and opinion and they should listen to me, and that they were lying. And because my dad was in the best shape of his life. But as we know, when we're in the healing journey, or what I know about it now, the lungs is connected to grief. And there was a lot of this unprocessed, unresolved grief. And with my brother, with him losing his mom and him giving his lungs out.
He's got 2 kids left to care for.
Yeah. So there was that grief, and 10 months later, he transitioned 10 months later. So before I'm 20, I have my youngest brother who's 15. Who's now, who is under my caretaking. And I entered my 20s with this wrath of like, I'm going to prove everyone wrong. I'm going to, you know, I'm going to just overachieve and overdo and overcompensate. And so that was a tough time.
Yeah. I mean, and did you give yourself any time to even, well, I mean, you can't make sense of those things, but to grieve, like, or was that something that came later?
So looking back at it now, I think that for, you know, any young person or anybody who's listening to this who has people going through that sort of grief journey, I think that you do the best you can. Because again, you know, I mean, like I was in survival mode.
Yeah.
So, and the caretakers, the teachers, like think about the school principals, people were worried that we were going to do something to ourselves, either my brother or myself. So it was almost checking the box of, okay, you're going to go to therapy. You're going to go to this, like, where you're going to draw out your feelings. I mean, I didn't go as deep into my healing until a decade later, where I would find myself in this soup of chaos in my love life, because I was just trying to crawl out of the pot that I was in, of this darkness and mess. And so part of it was, you know, at times I was working 3 jobs. I mean, I think the 2 things that really saved me in my young adult life entering in my 20s was dance, because I still kept the love of dance routines, you know, and Indian dance, Indian classical dance. That was kind of a core thing for me, and performing hip hop dances. So that was a big thing for me. I was also playing the piano. So music and kind of that sort of performance was healing, and friendships. And that was the through line. But my full healing journey wouldn't start until a decade later. At almost 30, I was 28 or 29, where I thought I fell in love. I found my partner. I went to dental school. I did really well, and I bought my own practice, one of the few women in my class and one of the few people in my class to graduate and buy a practice right away after school. And that did really well. It was 7 figures. So all of these achievements and things on the outside were really attractive looking. It was even like, wow, she made it. All family and friends.
You're checking boxes all over the place.
Aunts and uncles, everyone was checking boxes. It's true. It's just like, let's go. I had a big home. I mean, lived in this fancy place in Chicago, in the city. And so, but I was completely lost. I felt like I didn't know what my purpose was. I felt like I had been living such a lie, and I felt like that there was, that I was a fraud, that I wasn't really being truthful, because truthfully, I was in an abusive relationship. I had sacrificed my desires, my wants, my needs, and I was living in fear. And things had to get really bad before it got better. And December 31st, I walked out on my marriage. And so, but it didn't come without its ups and downs. I mean, I literally looked in the mirror that day, and for the first time in probably a decade, allowed myself to fully break down and dry heave and fully cry and let all of the emotions that I had been holding in so tight, because I felt like I had to keep the peace of my family, keep the peace of everything together. But I couldn't hold it in anymore. It was just like bursting at the seams, and it had nowhere else to go. I couldn't shove it under a rug. I couldn't put it back in a closet. Mm-mm. I mean, and
those breakdowns are important moments.
Yeah, and we don't allow ourselves to do them.
We don't. I had one when I was leaving my first marriage. I'm divorced twice. And I remember the day. Thanks. I remember the day having that breakdown, though. And I can remember like flopping myself on the bed. And I was like, I think I'm having a nervous breakdown. But I let it out. And then I knew I had to make change, you know? And that was really catalytic, is that the word? It was a catalyst, right?
Cataclysmic? No.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds right.
Both of them. We'll take both.
So does, we just passed New Year's. Does it hold do you have a moment on that day? Because how many years ago was that?
That was 11 years ago.
11 years ago. Okay.
And so absolutely, I mean, I feel like every day around New Year's, and I've had my fun times of New Year's and all of the things, but when this was happening, fireworks was going on, and people were, you could hear the joy of people's faces, screaming and laughing and outside. And I was in Chicago at the time. And so there definitely used to be a lot of those triggers, and really I wanted to cocoon and retreat back to myself. And now it's like a celebration of, celebrating my voice and celebrating literally a new year, literally another. And now with little babies, I mean, we were off to bed at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
But it's really a kind of a reclamation time at the end of each year, just celebrating, wow, how far I've come. And also to see, because every year, I mean, there's at least, if not a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen people that come out of the woodwork and say, hey, I've had something similar that has happened to me too, or I just left, or I just shared my voice, or I just came out of the closet, or I just left a really big thing that I completely hated. So people really honoring their magic and their mess. And I'm so grateful that my own story has been able to inspire so many people, I'm sure as yours as well. And it's been, it's 11 years later, right? So right after I left my marriage, I went into full, the breakdown mode. And to your point of allowing, and actually for the first time asking people for help. Because for so many years, I was afraid to ask for help. I didn't know how to ask for help, because in my culture, we're taught, you're keep those things to yourself and don't let anybody in. And you're kind of well, why? What are they going to do?
What happens then?
What happens when you be vulnerable? It's that old paradigm mentality of we have to be strong. Well, what if we're not? And that's okay, because we're all human. And guess what? When we release our stuff, we may build a bridge because somebody else is also sharing that they're probably having a really tough time with something.
I know nobody's strong all the time.
No, it doesn't even exist.
No, it doesn't exist. It's a perfectionistic idea, and that's a fallacy.
Recovering perfectionist
Same.
over here. Oh gosh.
Same.
Yeah.
I mean, I still slip into it, and that, I think that's why I love the subtitle, the joy and chaos and the magic and the mess, because that's a ongoing practice for me.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. And I don't know about, do you find that you also attract people that need to heal that in themselves? Because I feel like
I'm with yes. And plus I'm with someone now in recovery, and but yes.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the mission, because I've attracted a lot of people. I mean, either folks that I work with or team members or friends even, that are so, they carry the perfectionist tendencies of where I used to be. And it's almost as a mirror, don't want to go back there. Okay, you know what you used to do, And I even start to see it in my son now. of like, oh wait, I used to be like that.
Yeah.
No, am I passing that down? And then you're kind of like, well, actually, no, that's their own journey.
Mm-hmm. It's not all about me.
That's their own journey.
Yeah.
Let them do their thing. But it's a great mirror to see, oh, okay, well, that's where they're at. And then this is where you're at. You're on the other side of that.
Yeah.
But I think it's also a reflection to see, oh wow, okay, maybe it does come up still. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things that we just have to like tame. So it's a conscious taming, I think.
I think it's a conscious taming. I love that phrase. There you go. It's part of your next book.
There you go.
Y'all, I have started using higher dose products, and I am such a fan. You know, I don't put anything on this podcast that I am not 100% completely behind. And I have a special discount code for you for all higher dose products. I'm so excited. If you don't know, Higher Dose is a wellness company. They have wellness tech products, they have tools, they have supplements, and they have body care. They have so many things that are hot right now too, that are really biohacking and up-leveling our lives at home, which is really cool. They have an infrared sauna blanket. They have an infrared PEMF mat that I'm so excited to be sharing about soon. One of my favorites though is the red light face mask. It stimulates collagen, it activates glowing skin, reduces fine lines, regenerates cells, and it's soft. It's not like one of the hard plastic ones, so you can kind of move it around on your body, which I've been doing, and I am seeing amazing results. I am absolutely addicted to it. I use it every single night, and I'm using it in conjunction with one of their other products, the Glow Serum. And I'm very picky about what I put on my skin, and I am loving the Glow Serum. It's specially formulated to plump and hydrate and stimulate radiant skin, which that's the goal. They have a ton of other products too. Magnesium ingestibles, magnesium body care, which has a healing oil and a serotonin soap that you can use in your bath, which I've been using too. It boosts your mood, enhances your skin, and deepens your detox, gets you calmed down. Anyway, I'm a fan, so I'm so excited to offer you 15% off using my code MAGIC15. Go to the show notes. You can click through on the link right there, or if you go to Higher Dose, just enter the code MAGIC15 and you'll get 15% off. Higher Dose has been featured in Goop, Glamour, Elle, Vogue, Bazaar, Allure, basically you name it. And there's a reason why. So go check it out. It's at higherdose.com and enter my code MAGIC15 for 15% off. Are you ready to up-level your pleasure practice? I have in mind, and the main things that have helped me are the tools that I've found from Wands. Wands creates luxurious products that encourage us all to honor our body, celebrate our sexuality, and live in pleasure, with more pleasure all the time. One of my favorites, if you listen to this show, then you probably already know, is the Cervix Wand. Wands has trademarked their #1 best-selling glass pleasure wand. It's for vaginal and anal de-armoring, and it's designed for cervical and G-spot stimulation. And let me tell you, it's incredible. It's helped thousands of women become more connected to their bodies and their pleasure, and supports them to heal pelvic pain through self-yoni massage, and helps awaken more pleasure. Just recently, I've ordered the Venus Wand, another trademarked wand from Wands, and it's designed to activate and awaken the G-spot and more. Also, don't miss one of their new offerings, which are free bleed blankets that can be used as waterproof intimacy blankets. They have a beautiful selection now available. But take a look around at wands.com, that's WAANDS, because they have a huge selection of incredible items like yoni eggs, crystal pleasure wands in amethyst, black obsidian, anything that your heart desires, and so much more. Check them out at wands.com, that's WAANDS.com, and use my link in the show notes to get 10% off, or simply enter my code Amy Edwards at checkout. Again, that's WAANDS, wands.com.
Conscious.
Yeah, because it is, and you just can run yourself into the ground and not only get so exhausted, but just be miserable, especially with kids if you're trying to make it perfect.
Oh gosh.
It's so not fun that way. And I've learned that the hard way many times, and I still hear stories of other people doing it, and I'm glad I've loosened up. Sometimes I'm wondering, does it come a lot with age? Is it experience? I think it's a combination of factors, but
and life experience.
And
too.
life experience, yeah, of which you have a ton. So yeah. Well, so where'd this title come from?
Yeah, so this title actually was birthed when I entered the foray of motherhood. So,
Yeah.
Newsflash, fast forward, I did find love again.
Oh, yes, right.
I did find my own magic in the suck of dating, and honestly trusting myself in the aspect of dating. And even, this is a practice for me too. There's one of the concepts that I talk about in the book called the bounce factor. And there's 4 aspects to it. But the one that I really lean into is our emotional capacity to feel and to allow ourselves to really feel the depths of our emotions. So to feel that sadness, to feel the guilt, to feel that jealousy even. And what is that actually revealing to us? Because for so many years, as you could imagine, I shoved all of those under a rug and distracted and buried and numbed. And, I think that really helped me when I was ready finally to let love in again. And I, did all of the things that everyone could possibly do in terms of dating. But I think the one thing that I was so convicted on that kept coming up for me as like a lesson, whether it was people I was dating or people that I would meet just randomly, either because I had traveled to 45 different countries and started spending time with different people in their walks of life and seeing what they viewed as success. And this was actually for my very first book, Emotional Grit. And I would meet very interesting people, and sometimes I would meet people that would be like, oh, okay, there we go. Love, romantic interest. Hello. But I'd still be in my head and I would judge our connection, and I would judge, okay, is there red flag? So I would always look for like the bad thing that could be a sign that this wasn't going to work out, because I think I was just fearful and scared. So until I reframed that to actually have and stretch my capacity to feel all of the feelings, and especially with my now partner, Ajit, there were times where I'm like, oh, okay, I feel scared. And I also feel nervous. And oh, wait, those two things can coexist all at the same time. And I actually feel reserved, but also curious. So again, allowing all of those feelings, but also if I wanted honesty, I needed to be honest. If I wanted my partner to be vulnerable, I needed to be vulnerable first. And so that was a big mantra for me in terms of, all right, how I was going to let love in. So I met my now husband, who is an incredible co-pilot, and we had some babies, and everything happened so fast, but fast forward into now the duality of like my own darkness and hardships and crazy walks in life. Fast forward into motherhood. I was
going to ask that.
Yeah, and I never appreciated the duality of life and the other side of the spectrum when you're not in it. And I'll give you an example, because I had an experience, and I'll tell you a very quick story, but after I had my son, there were so many conflicting emotions that I had, because I didn't have my mom. So that brought up a lot of grief and a lot of like, well, I can do this on my own. I guess I don't need her. So I was like angry and upset and frustrated. I had my aunt, who has been my cheerleader. She's been my bonus mom.
Is that your mom's sister? Or
my dad's sister. Okay. My dad's sister, Bua. And she's been such a tough love with me, but she was there at the birth of both kids. And specifically with my son, where I had all of these conflicting emotions. And my mother-in-law as well was also there. Bless her heart, she came from India.
Wow.
And so we had a whole trio, but I could not receive, and I pushed both of them away. And I almost wanted to make them feel so bad, and it was my perfectionist tendencies. Again, it like rose like a lion.
Did all this kind of surprise you about yourself? Because you've done so much work. You've written these books. Like you speak out, you're vulnerable and all these things. So were you a little bit like, no, look at me. What am I doing?
No, I was like, am I really like, I'm crazy. Oh my gosh, I'm crazy. The thing that they say about postpartum, it's so true. You become so crazy. And I mean, it was literally emotional capacity on fleek. Like it was just another level. My husband had never seen me in this way. He's like, how can I support you? And I just needed to accept that, okay, my identity was slowly shifting and turning in all of the ways, that the perfectionist wound that I have of the worthiness underneath it. Am I worthy if I'm not perfect? Am I worthy if I'm not contributing? Am I worthy if I'm not taking care of everyone? Because this is the first time that I'm not taking care of people, that people have to take care of me. And I was self-sabotaging because I had never experienced so much overwhelming care. And in the Vedic traditions, or in Ayurveda, after there's like a 40-day sitting period, I didn't want to do that. And the elders, usually the women in your family, they come and they take care of you, and they like wash your feet, and they massage ghee all over. Literally, they put ghee in your ear and your hair and all of the things, so that you can make milk, and they're nourishing you, they're nurturing you. And it's only here where we're like, no, we'll do everything on our own, and we don't accept help. And so I was refusing, and I needed to allow. I needed to allow. And so that was the thing. That was my confliction. And it was there where I was like, okay, this mantra literally dropped in, and it was like, all right, that sucked. Let's start over.
Yeah.
And Ajit and I would do this constantly. All right, that sucked. Redo. Can we do a redo? I'm so sorry. Let's do a redo. So that sucked. And now what? And that was the mantra, because in those first, few months, I realized that my dark days were not the lump in the throat, the pins in the stomach of like, oh my gosh, is something bad going to happen? It was a very different kind of grief. Yes, I'm grieving the loss of my identity before kids as a single woman, but it wasn't nearly as bad as what I had experienced growing up. And that was the dichotomy. That was a huge difference. And then fast forward to, 6 months later, I'm looking back at that postpartum time, and I'm like, whoa, I was really in a dark soup. Yeah, things were really, and so we can't really recognize the full spectrum of our emotions until many times we're on the other end of it, where we can look back at what we went through and say, oh wow, okay, that really sucked. The way that I handled that, or the way that I was like in the book, I talk about a concept called the pity party of one, where we're in our victim state. Yeah. And many times when we say, well, that sucked, it allows us to be stuck in the suck. And I think for most people, and most, achievers and people that want to, go get in this world, they're so used to like bypassing over the suck, like just jumping over. Yeah. Because they don't want to sit in the suck. They don't even know how to embrace the full suckiness of the suck. And then we have, the other side of people who stick and stay.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. Like saying that sucked is almost getting an awareness, and you're stepping out. When you say this sucks, you're in it, right? Yeah. And so this is actually, not only is it past tense, but it's giving you a little bit of that awareness perspective where you can just step out just a little bit.
Oh my God. Well, yeah. In the fourth part of my bounce factor is, no. Because there's 4 parts, but the first is basically, we've got to look at our upbringing, right? Mm-hmm. So looking back in the darkness that I experienced, and then getting into, well, the current environment. So what are we going to do differently? And even just in the mantra of that sucked, it's acknowledging our radical self-awareness of, all right, well, that was shitty that I was in that. And how are we going to get out of it? So absolutely. So this became a mantra. And every time a bad thing would happen, I mean, small or big, or, we forgot to wash one of the bottles, or, it was like one of those things, or forgot a burp cloth. I mean, all of the things that go wrong, right, in anything, but I'm using parenting as an example. Right, you think you're totally
prepared, and then like they throw a curveball, and you're wow, didn't see that one.
And it didn't see a lot of those things. Yeah. But you can say, okay, now what? And when I talk about that sucked and now what, it's the acknowledgement and saying it, as one of our dear friends says, say it out loud, but it's saying it actually out loud. Well, that actually sucked. And that's a trigger for us to accept the reality that we are in the moment, to then start moving past it.
Yeah, it's a really good one. It's a really good mantra because it's so simple too. Like you can just go, that sucks. And we tend to, at least me, I can make things way more complicated than they need to be. And distilling it down to something super simple. I have been an independent rock and roll artist in my early 40s. And I remember I was working on a song that meant a lot to me. And I had written pages and pages, right? And I was telling the producer, and he was young and he was so cool, and he's amazing, David Butler. Aww. And so I had written all this, and I tell him about the song and what I've written or whatever, and he goes, "So you're just trying to say like we do what we want?" And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying. And so like that became the refrain of the song, but it just struck me like so many times we can make this like the chaos and all that. You get wrapped up in like, oh my God, my thoughts are racing, it's too much, but if you can just simplify it down, like, okay, that sucked. And this letting go-ness of it.
Yeah, that we're not holding on. We're not ruminating.
Well, when you say that about you and your partner, or I'm sorry, your husband, saying that to each other just in these moments where you didn't handle it right or you weren't your best self, like what a nice thing to, like a agreement that you almost have with each other where you're like, okay, we can get a do-over. We can say that sucked.
Yeah. Oh, I now started introducing it to my 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And so he's like, that sucked, Mama.
What
like,
a service you're doing to him. For him. Not
for him. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, wow.
So introducing it and making it fun and playful, which is why I love the title so much. Well, that sucked. Okay, now what? Because it's allowing us to then not fully sit in the suck. And of course, I have an embodiment practice. I have, these emotional release practices in the book to process some of those feelings when they come up.
Nice.
But we can actually look to the next chapter and say, okay, now what? Now what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, it's feeling it all, like you were saying, like allowing all those human emotions to come forth. Is that hitting you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, I mean, we could even spend a whole other episode talking about just the full spectrum of human emotion.
Yeah. And
I think that the going back to what we had talked about before, like allowing ourselves to break down, allowing ourselves, like, I don't know, we probably grew up in a similar era of like growing up. I was told, nope, big girls don't cry. You're strong, you're tough, you're resilient. So for me, when I talk about resilience in the book, it is not just about being tough. And it's not just about like the mental toughness, because that comes without saying. But what I'm really talking about is the true meaning of resilience is resiliere. Like from Latin, it's to bounce. Literally,
that's
to
your
bounce. That's the bounce.
Well, I mean, I think of that analogy with the bamboo, and how it doesn't break, bends and not breaks. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so great example. So if we're going to use the example of bamboo, well, the bamboo has a sort of bend in it. If we take a glass and we let it go on your beautiful floor, it's probably going to shatter in a million pieces. Now, that same bamboo, if we try to break it, it's going to bend. It has a little bit of agility. It has a little bit of flex. It has a little bit of softness to it. It's not brittle like glass. And I think that's the beauty of resiliency. Resiliere in Latin is to bounce. And when we're allowing ourselves the softness, not just the toughness, but that they both can coexist at the same time, and that we're not like so hard on ourselves if we're not doing a certain thing right, or if it's not going as to plan, like that we can actually move and flow like to, I don't know if you've ever seen like the Cirque du Soleil, the artists. Well, when they're like up in the air and these aerial dancers and they have, they're catching each other, the trapeze artists, like best example, but they have this beautiful flow with each other. why can't that be a metaphor for our resiliency? They have to be able to be agile and move and catch one another so that they don't fall.
Imagine if they were all stiff.
Oh gosh.
Weird.
We wouldn't want to watch that, right? At all.
No.
Like, that wouldn't be fun.
We would be cringing. So we should cringe at ourselves when we're that. Well, maybe we shouldn't. You know what? That's the thing too. When we are that hard, can we allow ourselves grace to,
Absolutely. Now I'm so glad you caught yourself. Like, this is it. That's the beauty of it, right? And yeah, would being rigid be good for anyone? Probably not. But is there a space for it? Possibly. But can we add more of that bounce factor to it?
I mean, just recognizing those moments when you perhaps are rigid, especially with your kids or whatever, because those are the times they're going to show up too when they're throwing a fit or whatever. And you're like, let me get a hold of this. It's not that big a deal.
Oh, it's so true. And if we are rigid with them, they're going to persist.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So they're going to soften us up pretty fast.
And now you have a 1.5-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, that has been fun and chaos on a whole new level. And, for the moms in the room, I think you'd obviously appreciate the subtitle too, the joy and chaos, because it really is. My husband and I, Ajit and I, we have been very clean people and very particular in what we want in our space. And I already, as a mom, you intuitively know what you're getting into in this like next evolution of yourself or how your home is going to be laid out. And when we moved to Austin, and my husband comes from a very different perspective, very different way of living. He was born and raised in India and then lived in Malaysia for about 10 years of his life. So coming to the US was very different, and also with children.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting. Well, we're going to have a toy room and the toys. And he's like, no, we're not having any toys. And we're like, okay, just wait and see. Just wait and see. It's so funny. They have to learn experientially. Yeah. And now I just talked to him the other day. I'm just like, okay, so remember when you used to say no toys in the house, and now we have like 3 different play areas. And so that's the bounce factor, allowing ourselves a little bit of grace, and the idea that we can kind of make fun of ourselves in the process as well. And because so I talked about, the upbringing of the bounce factor and how high you can bounce. And, the second thing is your current environment, where what are we allowing ourselves exposure to? Like, are we just staying complacent? Are we actually committing to some sort of change, or changing our environment, or changing the way we, do things? Or, like yourself, you started a rock band.
I just sort of said yes to some friends, and then one thing led to another.
I love that. I love that. I just got a new karaoke machine, and I have not.
You may have a music career ahead of you. You don't know.
It's so true. Yeah. We started. I wanted to strengthen, my vagus nerve as like a, as a way for calming the nervous system, and for those who don't know about vagus nerve work, it's basically the one nerve that runs throughout our entire body, and when we activate it, and we can activate it through singing, through humming, through chanting, and many times when we're doing mantras, it's why a lot of times people, when they're meditating, they will chant and they will om, and there's a reason why we're, because we're vibrating and we're allowing our vocal cords to open up so that we can actually invite the rest and digest nerve to activate, which is part of the vagus nerve, instead of being in fight, flight, or freeze, which is kind of our primal brain whenever we're in fear. And so one of those things that I did was I got, and by the way, I thought it was fun to do with kids. And so I got this microphone that on Amazon you can get it for like $20.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
The one, it's like, it's got the echo, and
it's got like a thing on the bottom. So it does all different things.
Oh, it's fun.
They're amazing.
And they think it's the best toy because their voice projects and they can say all of these things. And so we've been practicing our singing. So maybe I'll come out with an album or something. Who knows?
Yeah, so there's not only toys everywhere, there's just noise. There's just like racket everywhere. Yeah.
So it's literally the joy and chaos.
It is. My kids are the loudest. They're not as loud anymore because they're teenagers, but they were really loud for a really long time. How does your brain function? How's your brain? Like, do you find that you have more chaos in your brain, and so you look for order in your outside environment? And I'm asking because I kind of do that. Oof. And I didn't realize that about myself until recently. And that's been part of, like, my perfectionism is rooted in worthiness as well. But I think there's something to that also.
Oh my gosh. I love that you're bringing this up, because for me, for the longest time, like, I know I perform, like, I'm a high performer, which means that I can have many different tabs open. That's how I thrive. And there needs to be some order to my madness, because if there isn't order for me, it's like I can't function.
Yeah.
There's so actually, I don't know if you have ever done Myers-Briggs or...
Yeah, sure.
So I now, ever since I entered motherhood, I have to, like, I have to be a J.
Wow.
Because everything's got to be planned and scheduled. And if it's scheduled, then we can actually have the freedom. And I always think that, that's kind of the boundaries that I have for myself. Mm-hmm. Because, like, the house can't be chaotic and my internal brain can be chaotic. No.
That's where I can't, like, I have a lot of trouble with that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No.
But I always have. Like, I would have to clean my dorm room before writing a long paper.
Same.
Really?
Well,
yeah.
Same. I mean, I
heard that's a thing, because my daughter can function in this messy, messy room that she's got. But I heard that, like, it just started to dawn on me too. Like, people's brains work differently, duh.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have as much going on in her brain. She's able to function in a messy environment or whatever. And I'm like,
interesting.
I know, right?
Oh, wow.
And so I just was curious if your brain was like that. But what you just voiced was like how I feel. Yes.
Oh, totally. But I mean, it's not to say that we probably can give your daughter some, different tools.
Yeah.
She could clean up her room.
I cannot get her to. I mean, she's dyslexic and has ADD and has some other, her brain just functions differently. And she's very musical. And so I'm like, all right, you know what? She gets her stuff done. So I'm going, all right. I don't know.
Man. Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess it's something to be like to appreciate for sure.
I guess so. I guess it's like this human wholeness. Everything's possible, or so everything exists. I don't know.
Well, it's so true. And I think there's varying levels to that too, because now with my husband Ajit, he would think that I'm messy. And he would think that I am like everything's all over the place, because he is extremely organized. I mean, he's a Virgo. So it's you are a Virgo? Oh my God. Okay. Well, see, there's varying levels to that. So maybe your daughter's mess is not really messy. It's maybe just your...
I'm going to show you when we...
Okay.
Okay. You're going to be like, it's messy. No, yeah, I am a Virgo too, so I've got that going as well. So,
yeah. There goes the lessons there, right?
Yes. Yeah. What since writing this, like, what did it teach you?
Yeah. So even in writing this,
how long did this take you?
Oh gosh. Well, so really quick and funny story. So I knew that the journey of this book, I knew that it was going to get birthed in one way or another. I've written 3 books before that. And I think for me, I wanted it to land, especially for moms, especially for women in business, to be able to call in whatever the next thing that you're looking forward to is after the sucky moment, after the thing that didn't go well, after the thing that you didn't know that was going to happen, but it actually did happen. And I was playing around with this idea of like brave conversations and, having more brave ways to show up, because during this time we were also, pandemic and things were restricted. And so for me, this book has been just a concept in mind. And I started out with the podcast first.
Which I forgot to mention at the beginning. I apologize. The Brave Table is your podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's been such a fun ride. But even before that, while we were just having brave conversations in our home, in our dinner table, literally, when I gave birth to my daughter, so literally it was 2 days after I gave birth, it's when I sold my book to a publisher. And it was this publisher that's been on my like vision board for years, Hay House. And literally I felt like I knew in some intuitive way that I was going to manifest that. So that's like a whole, story in and of itself. But 2 days right after I'm literally in the hospital and they're going to release us, and I get a call from my agent and they're like, well, yeah, this is what's going on here. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I wrote the book the same time my daughter was born. So I took 2 months off for mat leave. And then I had a whole different process in writing this book, because I wanted to channel and speak out the book. And so every week I would have meetings with my editor where she's interviewing me on different concepts that I kind of just wanted to like get out. And so it took me then from there 6 months to fully finish writing the book. Mm-hmm. And then another 6 months to go back and rewrite or figure out another way to say certain things. So, a year to have it all kind of, so this has been a year and a half of work, actually.
Yeah,
of just putting it all together. I'm just thinking, I'm like,
it's amazing.
Oh my gosh, this is the first time I actually like thought about it. I'm like, yeah, it took a year and a half to put it all together. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah. Well, I know books take a while. So having a baby and just putting those like timelines together, I was like, that's no small feat. Like,
no, but I will say this though. I was in my creative, most juiciest element when because it was like real time. It's like real time teaching. Like, oh my gosh, I'm in the chaos of the soup of a newborn and my 2-year-old. He was 2.5. And it was, crazy transition in our family. Our house just got remodeled. We had just moved from LA. So there were so many things happening all at the same time. And it was literally the lessons that I learned were definitely to play, and there's a concept in my book called fly forward. So
I just flipped open to that too.
Yeah. So there's 3 parts to the book. And the first part is, the magical moment of suck, right? Mm-hmm. We get into the victim mentality. I talk about a concept called, the entitlement and privilege that, we all have or desire, and the difference between entitlement and privilege. And because when we're in our victim mode, sometimes we feel like we need to be entitled because we have a story and we, or we want things, but it definitely comes from a place of lack. And so then the next phase of the book is the bounce factor. So what we were just sharing about resiliere and, how to bounce even higher many times, but then we get into the final part of the book, which is to fly forward. And, when we're having our moments that sucked, many times we'll have a fall. And the fall might take us back and might trigger us. We might go into a pity party and a victim spiral of like, why me? Or we might learn that with every bump, it gets less and less and less, bumpy, because we've been through it a couple times. Yeah. And that's where we build our resilience. We have our cushions, on our the pads on our butts now that like ease the landing, right? And so when we get into that last stage of flying forward, we are acknowledging that there will be many falls, but every time can we rise again? And when we rise, step 3 is like, can we magnify? And magnifying what can look different in our life. So whether we're starting out something new, like a new venture, a new singing career, maybe new ways that we can organize our room, or even speak to our kids, I think that, that's when we can get into thriving, which is there's 5 parts. So there's a fall, there's the ignition, which is step 2, which is, are we going to make a decision? Are we not? Are we going to have that conversation? Are we not? Are we going to just, are we going to do that thing? Are we going to make the trip to Europe or
having
or
that
not?
spark, right?
It's just the spark for something. And then the rising part is being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And saying, okay, I'm going to suck at this, but maybe it might just be a good thing because I won't have any expectations if it goes well or not. And then
I love that.
Right? Yeah. And then finally, then we get into, magnifying where we're building consistent habits that get us on that train of full growth, and then leaning into thriving. And thriving means that we might still feel the duality of those feelings, and we might still have a fall, but now we're making it about what other people experience in our impact. So we start the podcast, or we start volunteering at an organization, or we start volunteering at our kids' school, or take a new position somewhere where we're creating more impact with the contributions that we want to make.
And we're understanding that the moments that suck are part of our humanity.
Yeah.
It's and like just a wider perspective.
And they add to our connections with other people as well, if we're willing to be open to sharing that as well.
Can I just ask something that you mentioned that I want to go back to really quick is you said being a victim comes from lack? I guess I hadn't thought of it that way. I think of it as not taking responsibility for your life a lot, or for whatever happens to you. But how do you see that? Like the lack?
Yeah. So when we're talking about entitlement.
Okay.
Yeah. So victim per se, when we're stuck in our victimhood, we're saying that we don't have a lack of choices. There's a lack of choices, right? That we're not.
Oh, that's good.
Right. And if we're getting out of the victimhood, we're actually making a choice to think differently, do something different, get out of our comfort zone.
Yes.
It's getting out of the complacency that we're in.
And you're in this blame thing, like you did this to me, but really I had a choice, I had a choice. In fact, Justin just did something yesterday and he acted like he didn't have any choices and it was my fault. And I walked over to him and I said, I'm saying this with love, but that was a victim mentality. But that totally makes sense. He was acting like he had a lack of choices and he did not have a lack of choices.
And then the entitlement comes in, thinking that, okay, gotta speed up, take the shoulder because there's a lot of traffic to get off the ramp, or it could
good one.
It could look like, and we've all done this, right?
Oh.
We've all been guilty of our entitlement, right?
Yeah, I'll feel like the rules don't apply to me.
The rules don't apply.
I'm so embarrassed. But.
Well, it's so true. We've all done it, or like getting to the airport, and I've done this too. But like getting to the airport right when your flight is about to board, and there's this long line. Yeah. Can I just get through? We're talking to TSA to let you go through.
I bet you get through every time. You're so cute. They're like, you come through here.
Well, it's funny because I have this gold jacket that I like.
I love it.
It's and so yeah, it's such a noisy jacket, but
I want one already.
I'll send you the link.
I love flashy clothes.
Oh, it's fun.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we got off on a tangent, but yes, victim entitlement. That's where we were.
Yeah. So, I think that with entitlement, many times we think that there's not enough for everyone. Therefore, we have to hoard. Therefore, we have to compete. Therefore, we have to put others down.
Mine.
Therefore, it's a zero-sum game. It's, imagine if you were in a singing competition and there's only one winner, right? There's only one winner. Or, take the Olympics, or even kids playing a sport, right? There's a winner and a loser. And so many times, even when we're young and with our kids, we're instilling this idea that there is going to be a winner and a loser. And so the idea that, okay, if I've been through a lot of losses, like our team didn't win all season, we should win this one, right? Well,
we're due,
we're due to win, right? And yeah, of course we want the underdog to win. Like, who doesn't? But really, there is just a winner and there is a loser. So if we're taking it in that context, then someone can grow up to believe that, well, I mean, it's my right. I should be.
Yeah.
Versus asking, well, and taking personal responsibility and saying, okay, well, how can I get better at this? Instead of just thinking like, oh, I lost the last 5 games, so I deserve to win this one. Well, of course, the other team deserves to win as well. But what makes you so special in that? And I think that, that idea that I talk about in the book is very much appropriate when we're stuck in our victim mode, because it's easy to then blame other people. It's easy to go in our spiral, and mostly get stuck in the suck. And not only that, there's a whole chapter that I have around resentment and why we actually stay stuck in the resentment if we're not able to voice out our feelings and our emotions and to actually feel it. And not only that, take responsibility for the feelings that we have when we're in that suck.
I'm on step 4 of a 12-step program.
Oh my gosh.
In Al-Anon. So it's all about like resentments and taking responsibility. And some of them I'll be like, I don't have a role in this. And then I'm like, okay, let's get real. Because, I'll be like, I didn't enforce my boundaries. I didn't, whatever that is. Which one of the things that I want to touch on before we stop too is, since I brought that up, boundaries. You mentioned something about boundaries with yourself.
Oh, yes.
And I thought that was really interesting too. Because you were talking about earlier, if I'm dating and I want someone to be vulnerable, I have to be vulnerable, We have to do that with ourselves too. If we want to, be able to trust, we have to trust ourselves. And anytime you're doing the work on yourself and finding boundaries with yourself, or telling yourself something, I'm not going to accept that anymore. If you do it anyway, then you're not even trusting yourself. So you can't even build that trust.
So true.
Yeah. Is that kind of what you mean by boundaries with yourself? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So making sure that let's just take, for example, it's like the beginning of the year and everyone's making their resolutions.
Oh my gosh, I have lists. In fact, they're right here.
All of the ways we want to improve ourselves, right? And so sometimes we'll say, okay, I'm going to actually, I want to wake up at 5 a.m. All right. So if we're going to use, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to, why do you want to wake up at 5 a.m.? Like what's the reason why you're imposing that boundary on yourself? So that is a inflicted boundary, which is great. But many times that necessarily doesn't happen because the intention is not there. The intention is like based on willpower. And so the willpower for me to wake up at 5 a.m. might last like 2 to 3 days, maybe 3 weeks, maybe, because that's willpower and that's just how it goes. Versus reframing that to say, I want to get up 30 minutes earlier, which means that I'm probably going to go to bed 30 minutes earlier. And okay, so you ask yourself, well, what does that mean? Well, that would mean that I'm probably not going to watch 3 episodes of
Mythic Quest. I'm watching right now.
Mythic Quest.
Mythic Quest.
White Lotus, right?
Yeah.
Emily in Paris. And so I'm going to there's a timer that I have for myself and I'm going to put myself to bed, right? Yeah. So boundary for ourselves. Another boundary for ourselves could look like, well, I want to be around more people that inspire me, or I want to be around like-minded people, more of that this year than I was last year. I love that. Right? And so, okay, well, what is that going to look like? And why do we want to do that? Well, I feel like I am more creative, or there's something that gets lit up in me when I'm around people who are as creative as me or singing just like me, or whatever that idea is. Okay, well, what are you going to do? All right, well, here's my boundary. I'm going to have conversations with 2 new people every week. And so, and the other boundary of, all right, I'm going to restrict the ones that actually are draining my energy, are keeping me stuck, are not lighting me up, or how I'm actually feeling after the conversation is not super juicy or yummy, which is an indication that maybe that relationship is on its way out.
Yeah.
And to notice that. So when we're creating our own self boundaries, we want to make sure that, okay, are they like, what are they for? So let's get really clear in why we want them. Because another really interesting boundary that people have in the beginning of the year is, I'm going to spend less. So what's the idea and the goal around it? So do you want to save more? Do you want to invest more? And it's very easy to have boundaries around money because we'll just say, all right, I'm not going to,
it's numbers too.
It's
like...
numbers and you have your bank account. So it's, you're right.
It's pretty concrete.
It's very easy, right? Yeah. And so it's like, well, and there's some people who still overspend and then rack up their credit cards, right? But it's just it. And so we want to get really clear with our intention for A, why are we doing it? B, what are the parameters and what are the habits that need to get created, or what are the things that we have to do? So the parameters around which that we're going to create these boundaries and why it's important for us. Like, what are we actually trying to achieve at the end result of it?
Getting to your why and getting to your reasons behind it and and the lifestyle that's going to go with whatever it is that you're saying, right?
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing, because we'll say, okay, I want to save 10% this year, or I want to spend 10% less. Okay, why are we doing that? Well, because all of our friends are doing it. Okay, well, what does that actually mean?
Right.
Like, what does that mean for you? Because your 10% could look very different. It could look like maybe not, leaning off on the Starbucks once a week.
Yeah.
And there you go. That's your 10% for the year, right? So getting super clear and specific and intentional at creating your own self boundaries, which will then give you a lot more freedom.
Not only that, it lets you know you're keeping your word to yourself, and it builds this self-confidence and self-trust that is just fucking awesome.
Oh, it's so juicy at the end of the day. I mean, the self-trust that you have, that's a huge thing.
That's been one I've been working on a lot. So I like it. I like it.
Good.
It's so good. You mentioned habits. So I would like to know what your daily habits are, your non-negotiables.
Okay. Here's the thing. Waking up with a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old.
You have young kids, so.
Yeah, I was on another show, and the person doesn't have children. And so they're like, tell us about your morning routine. And I'm like, yeah, so that's going to depend on the day. And you know, what meditations are you in currently? I'm like, okay, I'll tell you what we're doing right now.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
And so I actually even have a reel on my social on Instagram. And literally it was, there's a video getting captured of me like trying to meditate with my kids. And my one son is like getting up, and he's like doing this thing in my lap. Like he's like just bouncing in my lap. And my daughter, she's like walking around.
But I think I saw it.
But so the intention is there. Okay. The intention is there. Yeah. And the music is playing. So whether it's a 10-minute guided, and usually like if I'm by myself, I'll do a 10-minute guided, but my non-negotiables are, I make my chai in the morning, and that's a sacred practice for me.
I love that.
And that is intentional. And some days I'll do like rose, petals. Some days I'll do ginger. Currently right now I'm in like a cardamom clove kind of deal.
I love that.
It's great. And then add a little bit of cinnamon. It's cozy. And then I let it steep. Not only that, because if somebody's running around me, because they've been getting up really early, like 5:45 recently. I don't know. It's a season.
I remember those days.
Yeah. And so now you can't get them out of bed.
Now it's like, she's like irritated at noon, and I'm like, really? What? So it's weird. It's weird.
Oh, wow. Wow. It's a whole thing. It's the complete opposite.
It's just wild. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and sometimes I'll just take it and I'll inhale it in as like a full embodiment practice.
And that's like a breathing practice, and
it's a breathing practice. It's literally my intention of being mindful and savoring what I'm actually creating. So creating that is a sacred routine.
That's beautiful.
Where it's not so like, okay, I have to get my journal entry in because I'll lie to you and say, yeah, I'll do my journal writing.
Don't lie. We just want the real deal.
I mean, it happens, but it's not going to happen in the very first thing in the morning. Like, let the kids go off and do, the things and get them, and then I can start my actual day.
And sometimes you just sit there and stare at the wall for a minute,
or put your legs up the wall too. That's what I've been doing too.
I love doing
that. I forget what that yoga pose is, but
I do too.
I don't even, somebody
it's
correct
put your
us.
legs up the wall. That's what we're
it's
gonna
the
call
legs
it.
up the wall.
Yes.
And then the last thing though that we've been loving is we'll bust out our Amazon, our $20 Amazon microphones, and we'll jam out and we'll dance to a song and sing.
Nice.
And I didn't realize that my 4-year-old would get out of the cocoa melon phase, which for those who have really young kids, you definitely know what I'm talking about. But
I don't know.
Yeah, well, thank God you don't. Thank God you don't know, because you don't want to know. It's like it's all of the nursery rhymes.
Oh, that's cute.
But now he's liking like Taylor Swift, and I'm like, okay, I'll move into that. Sure, we can sing that and dance to that early in the morning. Yeah, so we have a little dance party, and that's
important. Getting that movement. And you're modeling stuff to them too. I mean, I think it's important for people to hear this too from you, because one of the notes I made when I was reading just your intake questions, about sucky moments in life, I think people can probably even look at you or anybody on social media, and we're just seeing, you posted that video, but a lot of people might just be looking at your talks or something and being like, or seeing like, oh wow, she wrote a book, she's got it figured out, she's got her shit down, and like I just wrote a note on here that sometimes it just feels like other people don't have the chaos and don't have the mess, and it can get discouraging. So I think it's really important that you share those things, that like, it's a wild ride.
It's such, I embrace the messy, and because I would get that a lot, like, oh yeah, everything seems so perfect. I'm like, yeah. And do you know my backstory? Like, I've been through it, and it's still every day a learning lesson. And I think that's the magic of even this book, is it gives you permission. It gives you permission to suck every day. And it also gives you permission to find the joy through the suckiness of that suck. And maybe that, the next day will be different and easier, and that we can have fun with it in the process.
Because you're learning from that day before too. So you're not operating from the same person that you were even 24 hours ago. You already learned, and you had a sucky experience, and you got stronger, and you're more resilient, and you're bouncing.
You're bouncing off the walls. You're bouncing everywhere. You're
resilient AF. That's right. So we're building that resilience. And this has been a beautiful conversation. And I want to just say thank you so much, because I liked you from the moment that I connected on Instagram, and I was like, she seems like a rad human being. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Same. I'm so glad that you're here, and I had a
feeling
that
we're here.
So more to come.
Yeah, more to come for sure. Is there anything as we're wrapping up that you want to, a thought or something on your heart, or anything that we mentioned that you just want to like emphasize before we go, or share before we go?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is, let's be brave to suck at something new. And maybe it's not even something new. Maybe it's something that you wanted to try, or that fell to the wayside, or you got off the wagon for, and you beat yourself up for. But maybe this conversation sparked you to try it again. And because tomorrow is a new day.
I hope so. That's amazing. And thank you so much. And everyone can pre-order your book, or, excuse me, you can go to thatsuckednowwhat.com, correct?
Yes. And when you do, we've got juicy bonuses for your audience. For those listening.
Oh, great.
Yes. When you go to thatsuckednowwhat.com and order it before the 31st to snag 3 bonuses. So the first one is, we talked about a lot of concepts around healing, and we created this beautiful 44-page in-depth healing journal. So it's a full manual. You get it for free. It's a digital version. It's beautiful. It's color copy. I mean, there's like 16 images inside of the book.
Cool.
And all of those are actually printed in color on the workbook. So you actually go deeper. Oh, that's a picture of the embodiment practice.
I love it.
But you go deeper into your self-healing, because many times when we're doing this kind of work, and if it's the first time or the 10th time, we want to invoke a space that is actually just nourishing for you. So that's the whole goal.
Nice.
And not only that, it comes with my 5-day healing practice. So every day for 5 days, you get one of my meditations, and basically we start with healing our relationships.
I love it.
And then we end with coming back to ourselves, which of course it starts and begins with you. And then the third bonus is you get a ticket to the That Suck Now What, a virtual launch party that happens at the end of the month. So
yay. That is so cool. So I'm so excited to offer those. So I'll put the link in the show notes. And can you share how everyone else can find you and connect with you on Instagram and all that?
Yeah. So Neeta Bhushan on Instagram, and we'll link that in the show notes. That's NeetaBhushan. And come and listen to The Brave Table. Well, we're going to have Amy on as well.
I know. I'm so honored to get to come on and talk about things more, continue our conversation, because you're so easy to talk to. So.
Oh my gosh. We had so much fun.
And we had so much fun. So thank you so much. And everyone go follow Neeta. And thank you so much for being here today. I'm always saying this, but I really believe that like what she was talking about, when we voice things, that has so much power and so much energy. So if you even thought of somebody during this podcast and you were like, you know what, this would resonate, send it to them, have a conversation about it, voice some things, get more vulnerable, put it out there, talk about your messes and your chaos. There is so much power and so much beauty and so much reclamation in that. And we can just keep rising, as Neeta was talking about, and as I always talk about too, keep rising up. And so thank you to you so much. Go get the book, That Sucked Now What? And of course, connect with me on Instagram at Real Amy Edwards, or on TikTok at The Magic Babe, or follow my newsletter and sign up at amyedwards.com. And of course, sign up for my courses as well. Ageless Mindset is now out. That is a free course, 30 minutes long, and Youthfulness Hack is up to pre-buy. So anyway, I just love you so much. Rate, review, subscribe, all the things. Share with a friend, because that's connection, and a lot of magic happens there. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our beautiful, wonderful, amazing guest, Neeta, and congrats on your book. And thanks to everyone. Till next time. This has been the Amy Edwards Show from Overcome Studios. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe. And thank you so much for being here. Sign up for our newsletter at amyedwards.com.